That's from the soundtrack of the game Viva Pinata, and it's by the composer Grant Kirkhope. He may be one of the most famous composers that you've never heard of, if you're not a gamer. But for video game fans, he is a legend. His titles include Donkey Kong 64 and GoldenEye, soundtracks which started out as little more than glorified 8-bit beeps, though today the soundtracks are recorded with full orchestras. Gareth Mitchell has been talking to Grant Kirkhope about the secret of good music for video games.
It's meant to be tuneful and memorable. I think that's something that we try to do an awful lot of. So I think that the fact that tunes endure over all these years is hopefully testament to that.
In terms of your relationship with the game's developers, are they sort of guiding you in your composition? Are they saying that there's a particular action sequence that goes on at this level in the game and we want this kind of music to go with this sequence? Or do they literally just hand it over to you? How does that creative partnership work?
A lot of times I'll say, give me an example, find me a YouTube clip or a movie sequence that you like that points me in the right direction. But I do think that any composer worth the salt's going to get a pretty good idea from a brief description. Like if someone said to me, it's a haunted ice forest or ice castle, like in Frozen, for instance, I'm going to be thinking about, Celeste and Glockenspiel and pizzicato strings and straight away, or maybe if it's a very warm forest or something like that, I'd be thinking about bassoons and clarinets and woodwinds and warm strings. I think it suggests to you immediately, what you're going to use for your palette to kind of create the sound you're looking for. So I think most composers will probably find that in the suggestion.
And a lot of games have specific, almost like little musical stabs that sit on top of the main soundtrack. So if a character is leaping or jumping for a particular kind of action, the music will respond in some kind of way. How do you kind of fold that in with the ongoing background track?
Yeah, sometimes we try to do it the same key, but it can't always work that way. Sometimes they're just sound effects and not always musical stings. So it depends. Like in Banjo-Kazooie, that was very linked. It was very nearly all in C major. And sometimes I used to worry about maybe getting some kind of key clash, but it doesn't really happen that much because it's recognised as a jingle and people don't seem to mind it if it isn't quite fitting in with the key of the music.
You can compose for an entire symphony orchestra, and yet it must be almost impossible to synchronise what the orchestra is doing with specific moments in the game, much harder than if the game engine itself is part of the composition and the performance of the music. How do you get around that?
There are lots of software that exists, kind of middleware that fits in between the music and the game that can handle stuff like that. So we can do interactive music. It's harder with stereo streams, but it is possible. The software takes care of, like, you can say you can jump at this point in the music but not the next point, so you can give a bar number and say you can jump to this part then, or wait a few seconds to jump to the next part. It's tricky, but it can be done. I still think we're not quite there yet with the kind of full-on stereo stream stuff that we're kind of using at the moment, but it's very close. And sometimes it doesn't have to be that way. Like, sometimes you want to write some general kind of ambient track that just kind of suits the mood. And if something pops up or happens, you can change to a different piece of music. You can write a battle piece or a combat piece or something like that.
Grant Kirkhope revealing all to Gareth Mitchell. We'll take a break from the Science Hour, but we'll be back shortly after the news with the brightest star in the universe and thoughts on life without numbers.